and welcome to this Unicourse video. My name is Ashley and the topic of today's session is meeting minutes. And the goal for today's session is for us to run through and clarify the purpose and the requirements and the need for minutes of meeting following on from meetings within an organisation. So let's run through the purpose first. So the purpose of minutes of meeting is to, keep a record of what has happened in the meeting. But let's think about what the purpose of meetings are. So, when planning for a meeting, it's important to be able to consider what the meeting is going to be about. It's important when you are involved in meetings to make sure that it does have direction. Is that meeting's purpose for you to be able to make decisions and develop a plan or a path forward? Is it for you to be able to generate new ideas and innovative ways of working? Is it for you to be able to work with different departments to gain approval, to reach an agreement on a plan of action? Is it to clarify responsibilities and set deadlines so a goal can be achieved? Is it to communicate essential information and hear everybody's views on it? There are a number of reasons why an organisation will have meetings. There might be annual meetings, there might be one-to-one meetings, there might be departmental meetings, there might be senior and exec meetings, there might be meetings with external partnerships, with suppliers. So there's a number of reasons why organisations do need to communicate in meetings and do need to keep some sort of log and register of how their meetings have gone. In some sectors and in some businesses, it's more of a necessity to keep the meetings because they need to be kept and maybe seen by public domain to see that actions are actually um, are happening and being completed in order to work towards something. It might be that in order to release funding for something specifically, you've got to be demonstrating that there is movement in a plan, in a project. So meetings and projects are usually quite common as well. But the main reason and the main purpose for a meeting is for people to communicate with each other in order to achieve something. Okay, so what we're going to talk about now is the different stages that a person needs to be aware of when writing the minutes of meeting. And it can sometimes be assumed that people just know what they're doing when it comes to writing minutes, and it's not always the case. If people don't understand why they're taking their minutes and what needs to be included in that record from that meeting, then there can be miscommunication, there can be actions can be missed, deadlines can be missed, and it can cause a lot of confusion and upset within an organisation. So if you're writing minutes of meeting, consider these four stages: preparing for the meeting, writing up informal notes in the meeting, then rewriting the notes formally on maybe a standardized template or, of some sort of format that's usual to a specific organization. And then the storing and sharing of that documentation. So let's talk a little bit about preparing. So, if you are new to writing minutes of meeting, you might think that it's okay to just walk in with a pad of paper and a pen and just try and write down what everybody's saying. It's not always that easy. Consider putting together a template, and you know, that template can be formulated from the agenda, and we'll go into that in a minute. Um, but it can help to provide some structure to how you're taking the notes. So you're not just trying to raise every single thing what every person's trying to say. It's that you are taking important, essential bits of information away in order for their minutes to be an actionable. documents, okay? And it's important for everybody to be able to understand it as well. You know, the way that some organisations standardise the documents, it will be um, difficult for maybe somebody to, if they were reading it for the first time or were like an induction. One time when I was a part of a strategic meeting for the first time, I didn't know half of the abbreviations that were being used on that meeting's document. So, you know, I asked in future, would it be okay if you just, you know, bracketed the abbreviation so I just don't know for the first instance what that means. And, you know, simple things like that, you've got to be sure that when writing minutes that the reader can understand it, no matter who the reader is, because at the end of the day, with the different purposes and reasons for meetings. People can be meeting at all different levels. People can be meeting that have no clue about, um, you know, the slang maybe that's used in one department, or the abbreviations that are used in one department might not be used by the other departments, and so on and so forth. So be sure that it's clear and concise, and you know anybody can understand it. So moving back to the agenda, now, and the agenda is a preparation document that you'll put together before a meeting to inform everybody what's going to happen in the meeting. Now, the key pointers here to include an agenda. Now, everyone has different formats. Some people even add it to maybe just a memo or a notice board, or it might just be put on your table 10 minutes before the meeting. Um, but the important things to include on an agenda is the date, the time, and the place. And that place might be whether that's virtually, and it might have a link, telecommunication details, or any sort of link for them to join a meeting. Or it might be the place, location, or what they need to bring or read or document. If it was for a project, for example, it might be that they need to read the project proposal before they go through the project plan, for example. um, any sort of agenda item. So anything that might be, obviously that the minutes will have a purpose. So it might have a title at the top of the page, and it might say, you know, a monthly teachers meeting, or it might say annual um, senior and exec strategy meeting. So it might have a specific title, but the items within it may have came from the previous items on the minutes of meeting from the previous. So if it's a recurring meeting, it could have come from there. It might be that it's a completely new meeting, and it might be that you send an email out to everybody and ask them who would like to add anything to the meeting's agenda. So you can do that first before you send it out. It might be that you send it out to people and you say, if you would like to add anything to it, send me the information before this date so I can edit the agenda and resend it out. So the agenda is quite important to prepare people for the meeting, because if people are attending a meeting and they don't understand or they don't know why they're attending it, they're not really going to be fully engaged and involved in that meeting. So let's consider that you are, you know, going into a meeting for the first time. You are writing the minutes of meeting. You've been asked to write the minutes of meetings, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, what am I meant to write down here? What am I noting? How much do I need to pay attention and take away from? Or, you know, if you was to categorize, make yourself maybe a little table, um, or, you know, some sort of template or format with these different areas in, you're more than likely going to gain the information that you need to then be able to elaborate further when we writing up them notes in more of a formalized manner. So the first thing that you need to think about when writing notes is, maybe you can make a list of the items from the previous meeting, or write a list of the items um, in the agenda, and you can consider at that point what decisions are being made relating to that item that's being spoke about in that meeting. So an example might be, um, the item could be performance management, um, say performance management um, of three members of staff, and it might be two two times members of staff are on a personal improvement plan, one member of staff being removed, and and then you're thinking about the actions and who's going to be responsible for doing that. So if somebody has been removed, who's going to be removing that and updating whatever process that needs to be done. Um, Also, the facts. So it might be any facts. So it might be, for example, an industry report has just been created by City and Guilds. It's a must read for the marketing department. So that might just be a fact that needs to be put down on paper. People may not need to action that, or it might be actions. It might be um, all marketing team to read through and take notes before the next meeting next month. Problems, any sort of problems should be identified, and if they can be actions and removed before the next meeting, then that would be a good idea. Or any decisions that would be relating to that problem to maybe just um, settle it down until that maybe another meeting for problem solving or creating ideas specifically could be identified for that. And then any sort of questions and answers, because you never know, the questions and answers that are being put in the meeting might be maybe something that people have been wanting to know for a long time. So, and it might be that there's people in the meeting, and maybe people that couldn't attend the meeting that maybe would like to know the question and answers that are being asked there. So, yeah, any decisions being made, any actions being taken, who's responsible for taking them actions, and deadlines are quite important as well. Any facts that are relevant to the meeting's agenda, any problems that have came up relating to any of the agenda items, and any questions and answers relevant to that topic as well. Now, when you are rewriting the minutes, it's a lot different. I mean, you probably got spelling, grammar, and everything mistakes in your notes. You might decide to take your initial notes on the computer or write them in text, but you've got to remember that the best the best formatted minutes of meetings are the ones that have been um, rewritten as soon as possible after the meeting while it's still fresh in your mind, because key points that you might have made you might need to elaborate further on, so complete them as soon as possible. Make sure that you highlight any essential decisions made. In some organizations you might want to put color codes for decisions or actions. You might want to um, be sure to maybe put an initial next to the person that's made that decision, or authorize that decision and that plan to go ahead. Um, but making sure that you identify who's responsible for each action and what date that they need to do that by is really important. And make sure that you've read it through a couple of times, that and confirmed that it is easy to understand by anyone who's been involved. Make sure that you don't go into absolutely loads of details. You are only summarising information. If you go into too much detail, people might just skim over the wrong points. So be sure to summarise with clear indications of who's responsible for what action and what maybe essential decisions could be maybe highlighted in a different colour or in bold or something like that. And make sure that you use spelling, grammar, and check for formatting as well at the end. So storing, so once you've written the notes, then you've rewritten them in it maybe a standardized document that the organization uses, for example, which is always good, because at the end of the day, the reader will know exactly where to look for what and how they can um, make sure that their actions are being completed. And usually, nothing really will be missed if you're using a standardized document that people are used to reading and highlighting the key points of. But then you go about, well, what are you going to do with that document once you've done it? Bear in mind that as the writer of the minutes, you haven't got authority to say who gets to see the minutes. It's usually the person who's requested the meeting in the first place and invited the attendees to the meeting. That person would obviously be hosting the meeting and will be talking about all the relevant information, and their level of authority is what really is going to decide who the minutes of meeting get sent out to, and whether that's via email, via Teams, OneNote, or a printed copy on the desk. It's their it's their decision ultimately of where who gets to see the minutes of meeting, because there is different levels, and it's maybe not necessary for everybody in the whole organisation to see the minutes of meeting, and it might be that decisions are being made on personnel, and if they got to see the decisions or the questions and answers that were given in that, it might be upsetting for people in the organisation. So really important to get justification and clarification of who's getting to see the minutes of meeting. In relation to storing the documentation, there's many different ways. You might use a cloud, you might use a specific folder. It might be that you send it out to the person who hosted the meeting and then they store it. But it's important to remember data protection, confidentiality, especially when it's relating to anything in relation to human resources, in relation to people. So make sure that you clarify where that information goes. Don't keep it on your desktop. Always send the information to wherever you've been authorized to send the information to. And make sure as well that when you are sending the information, if there's been a presentation on a PowerPoint or a Prezi or whatever, or if there's been a report that's been discussed and maybe there's been a handout in the presentation, you might want to send them as attachments or put a link in it if it's done electronically, to where they can get the information from for reading maybe before the next meeting. Here's an example, very basic, things to include in the minutes of meeting. And bearing in mind that, you've got your date, time, location, attendees. Sometimes you might have apologies because you have invited some people, but they can't actually attend. Um, so then you might say that the host might say at the start, apologies for this person not being able to attend. It's for this, that, and that reason. However, we will be sending the minutes of meeting and any support and documents out to them, so they're fully aware of what's happened and the decisions and the actions that are being made and taken within this meeting today. So again, having a formatted template is good for ease of reading, but it's also good to be able to clearly identify what's going on with who and at what point. And um, I've seen more than once, that there might also be a reference item. So there might be agenda items, but then the reference items might actually link with maybe specific projects that are taking place. It might be in relation to health and safety, for example. So you could elaborate further on this template, but quite um, this is quite a basic one. I do, however, like the fact that this one has um, a priority rating, because you'll know to put it right to the front of your to-do list if it's got a high priority. You'll know that if it's got to be done by this date with a high priority, that it's going to be put forward for something that you need to complete. So, what's the criteria for effective meetings? Being sure and making sure that the purpose of the meeting is clear to everyone via, notifying people beforehand of the agenda and the agenda items and letting them be involved in that. Making sure the participants are fully prepared if you're going to be talking about a specific report, um, or a marketing strategy, or you know anything really. They need to be aware of the documentation that maybe they should read or prepare or bring in beforehand. It might just be saying bring in a notepad or your computer to update your diary, or making sure you let them know if there's anything that they need to bring with them. Making sure as well, this might not be something that you can do yourself as a person that's writing the minutes. But an effective meeting is one that's time efficient, it's one that's sticking to the meeting's agenda items and not going too much off tangents, maybe giving yourself a limit of time within that you don't go over or under because, who's got time for that? Making sure the participants are committed to the meeting as well and sticking to that meeting arrangement if it's a weekly or a monthly thing. Making sure that they are committed to achieving the actions and the deadlines that are actually set within that meeting. That makes for a really effective meeting and, a way to always move forward. Making sure that the outcome should justify the investment. Now, what's meant by this is if you're taking 10 people out of their normal day to day activities for an hour or two, you need to justify, well, an effective meeting should justify the means of doing that. You know, you don't just want a meeting for the fact of having a meeting. There's got to be an outcome or an objective that's being met or actions that are being followed through or a plan that's being moved forward following on from that meeting. And then an effective meeting will always have actions, clear decisions that are being made, responsibilities, and some form of mechanism to review. If it's a one off meeting and you've sent out minutes of meeting, there should be the host or the lead of that meeting should be able to look back from the latest, deadline and say, tick, 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 tick. Well, everybody has done what they needed to do. We don't need another follow up meeting on this now and move forward with it. So, the final key points to take away from meeting minutes is firstly, if you can use a templates for the informal and the formal writing up of minutes so everyone can follow it. Secondly, keep it neutral, avoid being subjective or adding any form of your opinions or bias or anything in there. Use bullet points where you can because sometimes people can just focus more on them than a lot of text. Even if you do summarize a large conversation, pointing to just specific points in that conversation and the decisions and the questions and the answers might be a little bit easier to follow. But yeah, make sure you do summarize and only include the necessary information. Again, questions and answers, decisions, actions, and just key facts and to consider for that meeting in accordance to that agenda item. Make sure you stay within that agenda item when you are writing that up as well. And don't be scared when you are writing notes for, the minutes of meeting to ask for clarification. If you don't hear something and you put in a wrong date for the deadline, and then somebody else gets pulled up on that, it might be because you've missed the date. So if somebody said they want that done by Wednesday and they say, oh, next Wednesday or just this Wednesday, then you might want to say to them, can you just confirm that that's this Wednesday or next Wednesday for the minutes of meeting, please? And just ask for clarification. And then you'll often see on minutes of meeting, it would say AOB at the minute at the bottom, and that means any other business. So that opens up the line for basically for the discussion of if anybody else wants to add anything to the meeting. And it might be that they've gone through each agenda item and thought that maybe their opinion or what they wanted to talk about would link in with that topic. But then maybe that's why they didn't put it forward for an agenda item beforehand, but it didn't. So then maybe they did think, well, at the end, I'll just add it as any other business. So there might be additional items added as any other business, but be sure to only put things that link in with um, the agenda title and the agenda's overall purpose. I mean, the meeting's overall purpose. And if it is any other business, it might be worth, writing down key points and maybe setting an action to book in another meeting on this date to discuss this topic in more detail. So I hope that I have clarified a little bit about the importance of minutes of meeting, the importance of preparing for writing, rewriting, storing, and sharing this important documentation, and the importance of using it as a form of action following on from a meeting. If you do have any more questions on this topic, please feel free to contact me. Thanks for watching today. Bye.